Okay, we're now going to focus on the 5.2 notes um, entitled Adapting to Life in the Ocean. So in 5.1 we talked about the origin of life and how it's changed and adapted to various circumstances in order to thrive on Earth. Now we're going to talk about specific adaptations marine organisms use to be able to live in the ocean. Now, an adaptation is a process whereby a population becomes better suited to its habitat, and this usually has to take place over many generations. So notice adaptations work in populations, not individuals, and it can't be seen immediately in a living organism. It has to be taking place over generations. So we talked about how there's this inherent variability built into populations. In other words, all populations have genetic variability. That's important because that's what allows them to be able to adapt to given environments. Now, the first adaptation we're going to talk about is being able to adapt to salinity. There's something called osmotic stress, which is the change in solute concentration around a cell. This will cause water to move into or out of cells depending on the salinity. The term osmotic pressure refers to the pressure that must be applied to a solution to prevent the inward flow of water across the cell membrane, which is a semi-permeable membrane. Think back to biology, and the cell membrane is what we call semi-permeable or selectively permeable. It allows water to go through it, but it doesn't allow salt, and this is what creates that osmotic pressure. In a freshwater situation, a cell would be in what we call a hypotonic solution. As a result, water tends to flow into the cell because there's more salt inside. In an isotonic solution, the salt inside the cell is the same as outside the cell. So therefore, water goes into and out of the cell at the same rate. So it doesn't shrink, it doesn't gain water, it stays the same. So iso kind of means the same. A nice example of this is Gatorade. Gatorade is an isotonic solution. There's a little bit of salt in Gatorade. That helps our body cells not to gain water too fast. It kind of slowly hydrates our bodies and helps us to perform better. Then there is hypertonic solutions. This would be like being in the ocean. And you can see with this cell, because there's so much salt surrounding it, it tends to lose water. And this is the stress that marine organisms must adapt to. The loss of water due to osmotic pressure. So, what do? Well, there is something called osmoregulation, which is the active regulation of osmotic pressure of an organism's fluids to maintain water content. So, it prevents organisms' fluids from becoming too dilute or too concentrated. And there's one of two ways this can be done. An organism could be what we call an osmoconformer, where their body osmolarity, or the salinity of their body tissue, matches the environment. In other words, they conform. A lot of invertebrates do this. Blue crabs, for example, live in the Chesapeake Bay. Their body salinity will just simply match whatever the estuary calls for. If the estuary is full of 35 parts per thousand salt water, their body chemistry will match that. If they migrate up closer to the river mouth, it's more, the salinity goes down and their body tissue just matches that. They conform. There's also what we call an osmoregulator, which regulate their osmolarity by actively controlling the salt concentrations in their body. Marine fish do this extensively. And if we look at this diagram, we can see how they do this. There's always going to be water loss and salt gain through the skin. So remember in the previous slide, this fish being in an hypertonic solution like the ocean, it tends to lose water. That's not good. That would kill the fish. So really what the fish does is it drinks seawater. Now that's interesting because I'm sure you've heard that if humans drink seawater, it would kill us, and that's true. However, marine fish have an adaptation to be able to drink the salt water. They then use glands in their gills to regulate the salt ions. And also, and this is really the key, how they get rid of excess salt is they actually have very concentrated salty urine. So they drink salt water, filter out the salt through their gills and their kidneys, and they basically excrete the excess salt out via salty urine. and they keep the water. So pretty neat little strategy they use to regulate their salinity. Now, of course, there are different types of osmoregulators as well. Some fish are what we call stenohaline, which means they're restricted to either salt or fresh water and cannot survive in water with a different salt concentration. This is typical of most fish. If you were to take, for example, a tuna and put it into a freshwater lake, it could not handle that osmotic pressure and it would die. Same thing if you were to take a goldfish and put it in the ocean. Couldn't deal with it. They're stenohaline. Well, we also have euryhaline fish. Now these are neat little animals because they can osmoregulate across a broad range of salinities, such as these salmon here. And I'm sure you've heard of the life cycle of the salmon. They hatch in freshwater, live the majority of their life in the ocean, and then when it comes time to mate, they migrate back up into freshwater. A lot of the fish that we saw on our field trip and that we brought back to our aquariums are euryhaline. They can live in full salty water, but when it rains at Guana, the salinity goes way down, they can survive there as well. They're euryhaline. Well, now let's turn our attention to temperature. And we got to keep in mind that water is a pretty harsh environment as far as maintaining temperature, and organisms tend to lose heat a lot more quickly in water than in air. And that's true with us. If you've ever gone scuba diving, you realize this, that even when the water seems to be kind of warm, you still need to wear a wetsuit to maintain your body heat. If you don't, even though the water kind of feels warm at first, eventually it's going to rob your body of its heat. So that's why wetsuits are essential on dives. Well, let's look at the different adaptations organisms use to deal with this. Some animals are what we call ectotherms or poikilotherms, where their internal body temperature varies with the ambient temperature. And so essentially they're dependent on heat sources. Now, in the past we used to call these animals cold-blooded. And that's not necessarily a good way to describe them because no animal really wants to have cold blood that's going to slow their metabolic rate and could potentially kill them. They want to find ways to stay warm. They just have to use the environment for it. So reptiles do this. You can see this reptile here is basking on a rock in the sun to warm its body temperature. Marine fish, like this guy, will tend to live in warm tropical areas where the water's warmer and their blood and body temperature can be a little bit warmer too. So again, they're dependent on the environment as a heat source. Now, some fish are what we call endotherms, where their internal body temperature varies. In other words, they don't have a homeostatic set point for their body temperature, but it is always warmer than the ambient environment. And they usually do this because of vigorous swimming and their core muscles producing heat. Tuna and great white sharks are a good example of this. They can produce metabolic heat through motion. So when we look at a shark is actually considered to be warm-blooded. Same thing with the tuna. Now their body temperature will change with the water, but it's always slightly warmer than the water around it. It helps these animals to be very fast and very active. Then we have the example that we see in humans, being homeotherms, where we have a homeostatic set point where internal body temperature remains relatively constant despite the environment. So we always have a core body temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius, no matter what the temperature is. This is seen in both birds and mammals, and this is what allows birds like penguins to live in cold environments. Like these emperor penguins here in Antarctica can survive because they're homeotherms. They have a warm body core that always is maintained at a certain temperature, and they do this metabolically and with other adaptations like feathers and so forth. You'll never see a reptile in a polar climate because it's simply too cold. They can't warm their bodies up. All right, now the next adaptation is viscosity. And viscosity describes a fluid's resistance to flow. Water has a low viscosity, it's thin. Things like honey have a higher viscosity, so they're thick. Well, seawater tends to be have a higher viscosity than we see in freshwater. So it offers a lot more drag to fish motion. So there has to be some hydrodynamic adaptations we see in fish. And in the swordfish, we can see a good example of a fusiform body shape, which is tapered on either end, almost kind of like a football. Swordfish even extend this more with this very long rostrum. It's very hydrodynamic, helps them to swim through the water faster. Fish like this swordfish are also secrete mucus. So fish are slimy as part of their immune system, but also because it helps to reduce drag by 60%. Sharks, if you've ever had the opportunity to touch a shark, perhaps in an aquarium, or if you caught one on fishing, their skin is like sandpaper because they have what are called dermal denticles in their skin, and it basically helps to channel water away from the skin and basically helps them to glide through the water very quickly. It's interesting that a few years ago, Olympic swimmers were started to wear, in some cases, wear like full body suits that had imitation shark skin because it helps them to move through the water. Now, I don't know if they can still wear those types of things, but there are some body suits out there that mimic shark skin to help swimmers swim faster. All right, now we're going to talk about pressure. And hydrostatic pressure is essentially water pressure. It explains why when you go deeper in the ocean, there is greater pressure put on you. And if you're a scuba diver, you know this. As you descend, you need to equalize your ears because pressure will build up on your eardrums. You've got to equalize that. Well, pressure will increase 1 atmosphere, also, or 1 bar, every 10-meter depth. So notice at a depth, at the surface, there's 1 atmosphere, 1 bar of pressure. As you go down 10 meters, now you're experiencing 2 atmospheres, or 2 bars of pressure. Because not only do you have the pressure of the atmosphere on top, you have the pressure of 10 meters of water. And so here's the algorithm that you can use to calculate how much pressure is experienced. So at 50 meters, it's basically 6 bars or 6 atmospheres of pressure. What do animals do? Because some animals live deep in the ocean. How do they do this? Well, a lot will use light skeletons and watery muscles. In other words, they try to not have any air spaces. The light skeletons are more flexible. Their body cavities are filled with fluid rather than gas. And some animals are what we call piezophiles, which can thrive in extremely high pressures, such as deep sea bacteria will find at hydrothermal vents. And there's a number of animals that are like that. We're now going to talk about buoyancy, and this is, I believe, the last adaptation. And buoyancy is a big thing in the ocean because you need to find a way to not sink to the bottom of the ocean. So buoyancy is the upward force caused by fluid pressure that keeps things afloat. It's all based on Archimedes' principle, which says that any object wholly or partially immersed in a fluid is buoyed up by a force equal to the weight of the fluid displaced. One easy example of this is if you were to take an egg. If you put an egg in fresh water, it'll sink, because the amount of water the egg displaces weighs less than the egg itself, because freshwater's density is kind of low. Well, if you take that same egg and put it in salt water or ocean water, because that water has a higher density, now the water the egg displaces weighs more than the egg itself, so the egg floats. So that explains why an egg will sink in fresh water but float in salt water. Well, what do animals do to adapt to this? Well, a lot of plankton, such as the juvenile crab you see here, simply just have a small size. They also have the snowflake effect, where they have all these little spindly legs and antennae that kind of help them to not sink. They just are suspended in the water column. Sharks, like this hammerhead we see here, use hydrofoils. So this cephalofoil gives the shark a couple adaptations. We'll talk about, or a couple of advantages. We'll talk about that when we get to them, how this front end of their head almost acts like a metal detector. It helps with their vision, but it also acts as a hydrofoil to help sharks stay buoyant. Because some sharks, once they stop swimming, will sink, so they have to keep moving. Also, in sharks and plankton, they'll store oil. Plankton will have little oil droplets in them because oil is less dense than water. And sharks' livers are extremely oily, and they help them to remain buoyant in the ocean. Bony fish, which are your typical fish like tuna and even like goldfish and stuff, they have an organ inside their body called a swim bladder. And this is filled with gas, so it's essentially like a little balloon in their body that helps them to stay afloat. When they want to go up to the surface, they relax the muscles around the swim bladder and inflate it so they can go up. When they want to sink, they can actually compress muscles around the swim bladder, and that allows them to sink. Lastly, in this slide, I just, you might want to pause the video and write down these questions here. It's not mandatory, but the video I'm going to show in class will help to answer these 4 questions, and this might help you to get more out of the video and relates more to some of the concepts we've talked about in class.